Well, hello, friends. Welcome once again to another episode of Orange Weekly, presented by Crouse Health. We like to pop on here Thursdays right around noon-ish. And I say noon-ish because sometimes you got some technical gremlins you got to work out before we can get this little broadcast underway here. But we did it. We're back. We're here. A little holiday break. But we like to pop on here Thursdays on the Syracuse Orange football Facebook page. Got some final thoughts on the football season to get to. Basketball turned on, of course. We're on our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page as well. So your chance to be a part of the show live, get your questions and comments highlighted, is Thursdays around noon Eastern time. But if you do miss the show, we post it on all these channels you're watching now. We put up a story on syracuse.com, our social media channels. Very easy to find if you don't get to be a part of the show here on Thursdays. Our first show of 2023. There's Bay's in there. Let's go, Orange. Virginia going to be a tough one. Yeah, that's kind of the theme today, Bay, is it gets real now for Syracuse. This schedule gets tough over the next 4 or 5 games. Now, the ACC has been a very interesting league. You saw Duke go down hard to NC State. Virginia, as a matter of fact, loses at Pitt a couple days ago. So this is one of those anything can happen kind of leagues, but I'm kind of curious how Syracuse navigates a pretty tough schedule coming up here. I like this from our friend John Noon. Are you trying to steal Paulie's listeners? That's right. We're trying to take all of Paul Sibilia's audience right here on Thursdays. There's room for everybody out there for sure. So let's talk about a couple of things. Let's start on the basketball front, as we were just noting there. So this is a team that's won 7 of its last 8 games, which is notable, which you have to give them credit for. A couple of those have been by the hair on their chinny chin chin. And as a matter of fact, the one loss in there was a 2-point loss to Pittsburgh, who we just mentioned knocked off Virginia, and looks like it's going to be one of the upper echelon teams in the ACC this year, which was kind of unexpected, right? Some teams we knew would be up there. So I didn't think Miami would be the best team in the league, but it's been a very interesting league so far. To say the least, right? So that's what I'm curious about with Syracuse and how they'll handle this, right? As we check in with Alan right there, as we check in with Brian, what's up? Checking in from Mass. Saw Syracuse listed as an 8 seed on an NIT bracketology page, #improvement. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about here, Brian, because while Syracuse has won 7 of their last 8 with that 1 2-point loss to Pitt, and they're 3-1, they're 10-5 overall, which, you know, at one rate when Syracuse was not playing well to be at this point and have all those records is actually a credit to them, given the young nature of the team and some of the other things that we've talked about on post-game shows and elsewhere. But I want to point something out here. And I understand it's only January 5th, but currently in the NCAA net rankings, Syracuse ranks 143. Last week, they ranked 137. Syracuse's record, if you go through, remember, it's quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. You need as many quad 1 wins as you can. Certainly quad 2 counts. Quad 3 and quad 4, like, it does nothing for you to have good records there other than maintain and avoid those big-time losses. So as you go through the records here, Syracuse is Syracuse is 1-2 in quad 1. They are, no, I'm wrong. Sorry about that. They're 0-1 quad 1 so far, 0-1 quad 2, 3-3 quad 3, 7-0 in quad 4. And now you've got a schedule where Virginia comes up on Saturday. Virginia Tech follows. Virginia Tech and Clemson played a heck of a close game last night. If you got a chance to see that, Virginia Tech slipped a little bit. They're now 1-3 in ACC play after a good start. So let's look at those net rankings here. And pardon me while I do a little on-the-fly searching here. So Virginia's current net ranking at this point is, survey says, give me a second here just to find it for you guys while we're yapping about it. Virginia is at 20. Okay. We mentioned Virginia Tech. They're at 37. That's Syracuse's next 2 games. That's opportunity knocking on the door for the Orange at this point. Okay. So those are your next two games. And thought I had the Syracuse schedule here on my screen. Give me one sec and we'll pull it up here. Your call is very important to us. Here it is. Virginia is at Charlottesville. Virginia Tech next Wednesday. That's at the Dome. Notre Dame, January 14th, is at the Dome. At Miami, January 16th. So while we're continuing to look at the net ranking opportunities for the Orange at this point, because I was once told that all that matters is making the NCAA tournament, right? And certainly in a situation where Syracuse is coming off a losing season and didn't make it last year, even with the young team and everything that accounts for what this roster makes up, if that's all that matters, then let's focus on that. Notre Dame currently has a net ranking of 174. So that's just kind of a maintain type of game. Doesn't gain you anything in terms of the net rankings and your NCAA tournament resume. But if you lose it, it can ding it, right? And finally, in this tough 4-game stretch coming up for Syracuse, Miami's 35. So you have 3 teams in the top 40 of the net ranking in your next 4 games. The competition gets stiffer. Syracuse certainly showed they could play with Notre Dame earlier this year. But how they do against the upper echelon of these teams with these opportunities at this point of the schedule, ready or not, is going to determine how the rest of this thing goes, right? You may have watched this team, even with the winning streak we've talked about and some of the other aspects of this team, right? As John notes, the quad ranking there, Jimmy says, how many quad 1 games do they have left? Can't be many. See, Jimmy, that's exactly my point. There's not a ton of these opportunities left for Syracuse in quad 1 games, and they got a bunch of them right here. So you got a team that's got a terrific freshman point guard in Judah Mintz, who certainly has his flaws and makes his mistakes, but I love the way he plays, and he lost the ball at the end of the game the other night, and you're thinking it's like the Benny Hill theme is playing in the background. He loses the ball. Louisville comes up. They lose the ball. Syracuse escapes with a 1-point win. You know, Joe Girard, 28 points, 7 rebounds, 10 of 11 down the stretch free throw wise. We've had some very interesting conversations about Joe Girard on the radio this week and on social media this week. I think some of the criticism of Girard is just absurd, frankly. He has his flaws. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's perfect. Joe, takes shots from the logo when he doesn't need to. He's a flawed defensive player. Nobody's ignoring those things, but there are people that will never acknowledge when Joe Girard has a good game. And not to go all Jerry McNamara on you here, but this team wouldn't win 10 bleeping games, which they have currently, if it weren't for Joe Girard. So if you want to criticize Joe, that's fine. But dude had 28 points the other night and was the key to that win, and has been a key to a lot of wins for Syracuse. And ever since he had that 3-game stretch where he combined for 9 points in 3 games, he's been in double figures every single game, and the numbers are pretty, not 28 like he had the other night, but pretty consistently in that 16 to 22 point range, right? The problem with Syracuse right now is Jim Boeheim has been just exasperated at these post-game press conferences talking about is the forward position. Benny Williams, Chris Bell, Justin Taylor, Malik Brown, whoever kind of gets an opportunity here, John Bolajak, at times they just have not been able to find consistency at the forward position, particularly with Benny Williams and Chris Bell. So Benny Williams has that 16-11 game against Boston College, 3 points, 3 rebounds in 27 minutes the other night against Louisville. Chris Bell had a couple of shots and I think is slowly but surely getting better. But you can't, here's where somewhat of a criticism can come into play with Girard. Right? It's a credit to him, but it shines a light on just how poor the development has been in key areas with those other 2 players. Girard had more rebounds in that game than Bell and Benny combined. That can't happen. It especially cannot happen against Virginia and Virginia Tech and Notre Dame and Miami. Games coming up. So you have that flaw. This is a flawed defensive team overall. Teams are shooting a lot of threes against Syracuse, which always happens in the zone. But Louisville came in the other night as one of the most poorly statistically ranked teams in 3-point shooting. Offense overall, they were in the 300s in offensive efficiency, according to Ken Pom. And they were getting open looks. They were getting good quality shots. And eventually, even bad teams like Louisville's 2-13 this year. which is a whole other story, by the way, how that program has fallen off the face of the earth. But, we'll let Cardinal Weekly, if that exists somewhere on the internet, discuss that. It's not a good defensive team. They have their moments defensively, but they're not a good defensive team. The other problem that Syracuse has at this point is they start slow. Can you overcome that against Boston College, Louisville, some of the other teams that Syracuse has seen in this streak, which, again, I want to give due credit. They have won 7 of their last 8 games. Yes. Can you start slow against Virginia and overcome that? No, you can't. As a matter of fact, that's what Virginia wants to do. They want to jump on you. They want to grind. They want to play that Tony Bennett style. We'll get more into this Virginia team in a second here, but that's not the kind of game you overcome that. Virginia Tech. Now, that's at home. I would feel a little less confident about this if it was in Blacksburg, but Virginia Tech is a team that's exactly how they want you to play. They want you to start slow, and they'll keep you there, right? Notre Dame is the type of team, a lot of experience on that roster, but that game's going to go at a quicker pace, you would think. But the point being, you just can't keep doing this, all right? There's 2 halves in basketball, and Syracuse starts slow. Louisville the other night goes on a 17-2 run in what was a half-full Yum Center, the KFC Yum Center, always fun to say, right, in Louisville. And there's just something about this team that's been a consistent pattern that they don't start well. And look, I think there's ways to overcome that. I'm not a basketball coach, but I feel like when you have somebody like Jesse Edwards, who mysteriously doesn't get the ball enough at times, they went to him a lot more in the second half than the first half. Here's the thing, though. Teams like Virginia and good defensive teams, we saw it a little bit against Louisville the other night. They're going to push and shove. They're going to be physical. They're going to take Jesse out of his comfort zone. That relates back to what we were saying about Benny and Chris Bell. When Benny and Chris Bell aren't giving you anything in the paint, teams can focus everything they have on Jesse Edwards. Now, Jesse Edwards ended up with a double-double the other night, but man, he had to grind to get to that double-double. He had to work to get to that double-double. And it didn't really start for him until the second half. So that's where I think Judah's got to learn. As much as I love watching Judah Mintz play, I love the spirit he plays with. I think he's a gem. I think he's an absolute gem that gets better game by game. And once he really rounds out his game, is going to be one of the best players in the conference. He's already won 3 ACC Rookie of the Week awards. So maybe he's already there in a sense, right? But not that it's easy to defend Jesse because he's a great player, but it's easy to rattle his cage, get him into foul trouble. And now you're like, okay, what are you going to do, Chris Bell? What are you going to do, Benny Williams? Because they're not consistent enough to complement what Jesse Edwards does. So this is where this team is at now, right? Now the schedule gets better. You literally go from the worst team in the league to one of the best teams in the league. Virginia Tech, a manageable Notre Dame game, which I think Syracuse can win, and Miami, who is currently the best team in the ACC. Yet, as we saw, the ACC last night was wild, right? Jeff with the point there. Oops, I took it off the screen for a sec. Syracuse has always made a player or team look like the absolute best. Syracuse does have a habit of that, Jeff. A team that's down, a player comes out of nowhere, comes off the bench. It's typically a 3-point shooter, right, that hits 4 or 5 3-pointers. And you're like, who the heck is this guy, right? That relates to what Syracuse has been. Now, you're not going to be saying that. And Jim notes this. Wait till they play Clemson, who has great outside shooters, right? Virginia, a lot of the same names are there that you've heard in the past couple of years. Kei Clark is back. He's averaging 12 points a game. Jaden Gardner is at 11 points per game. Armand Franklin, 11 points per game. Reese Beekman at 9 points per game. And Caden Shedrick at 9 points per game. Now, here's the point with that. Listen to the numbers I just rattled off there. 11, 11, 11, 9, 9. Top 5 scorers. It's a balanced team that moves the ball, is unselfish. If somebody's got the hot hand, certainly you ride them. But that's a team that plays team basketball. Syracuse hasn't gotten there yet. They have their moments when they do it, but there's still a lot of ISO ball. There's still a lot of hero ball. Judah wants to take over at times. Joe feels like he's got to be the guy at times. The way the Syracuse offense operates, it doesn't operate that way. They had moments this year where they've moved the ball and looked like a team. But when you're not as experienced and you're younger and just related to how Syracuse plays, right? You play a disciplined, organized team like that on the road, who, by the way, is going to be in a bad mood after losing to Pitt the other night by 3 points, you better be on your game, and you better be on your game early, which Syracuse just has not shown the ability to do consistently this year. We got a couple months to go. Maybe they can come around here. But if they're going to do that, they're going to need some of those flaws to go away quickly, or at the very least, just get better at those flaws. Now, Jim brings up Justin Taylor here, right? I think Justin's coming along at an interesting rate. I think that I'm trying to phrase this the right way. You know, when you look at because what we're seeing now is you're into the throes of ACC play, right? It's 2 seasons. What you do in non-conference play, and now what you do in the grind of league play. You're going to start getting into those 2 games in 4 days situations, back-to-back, Saturday, Mondays. Justin Taylor's never been through that. Judah Mintz has never been through that, right? Benny Williams has not been through that. Remember, Benny barely played last year, right? He is essentially a freshman out there on a team that's got a lot of literal freshmen. He's essentially one out there. Jesse's been through it. Joe's been through it. Symir Torrance, who Jim mentioned at his post-game press conference the other night. Interesting that Symir told him he couldn't shoot, but he could pass, which is weird. He's got a bit of a shoulder issue right now, so we can't really count on Symir, at least in the near future here. Both Judah and Joe played all 40 minutes the other night. So you've got barely enough players on this team that knows what it's like to go through an ACC schedule, and you're playing a team in Virginia that obviously is an ace at it. So I'm as curious as you guys. You made some great comments about this. I think you're as curious as I am. I think this team deserves credit for the way they've played in certain ways. But I don't know if you guys have noticed this. When you watch Jim Boeheim's post-game press conferences, it almost has the air of like, we kind of got away with that. And he will consistently say, we're just not a good team right now. We're not improving at the rate we need to. I mentioned how exasperated he is with Bell and Benny Williams. And, you know, Benny is one of those guys, you know, Jim brought it up emphatically at the Boston College press conference that, you know, people that aren't at practice can't comment about playing time because Benny's our best forward at practice. Here would be my counter to that, right? And shout out to Stephen North Syracuse. Steve comes in the chat sometimes during these shows, who made a great point the other night on my radio show when he said, imagine going to a play, right? And the actors forget their lines and the set falls down and it's just a disaster. And then afterwards, the person who runs the theater is like, man, you should have seen rehearsal. Right? Like, that's not the point. What you do in the games is what matters. And what Benny is not doing in the games is what matters here, right? So I think Jim is as curious as anybody how his team is going to handle tougher teams, physical teams, consistent teams, teams that are going to ride you for 40 minutes, and you just can't get away with some of the stuff that this team has basically gotten away with to this point. So Saturday, 5 o'clock, Syracuse will play Virginia. Just a programming reminder, our post-game show will follow. If you're watching here on the Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page on YouTube, we put that on Twitter as well. If you do miss the show, same thing. We post the recap in my recap and on our social media channels, but always great to be here live so you can interact as you guys have been doing throughout Orange Weekly today. So right around 7 o'clock or so, game ends, usually within about 10 minutes or so. We're here, we're live. You guys get the notification, I'm sure. But just so you know, as we kind of get into the flow of ACC play, we'll be here pretty much every game for post-game shows following Syracuse basketball action. So you guys can continue on the basketball front here. I want to switch gears to football a little bit and just kind of put a bow on what we saw. It's our first show of the year. We weren't here after the Pinstripe Bowl. We were for a post-game show, but not here on Orange Weekly. By the way, an incredible connection was found today, was discovered. Let me read you the story. Emily Leiker posted this on syracuse.com. So we're all thinking about Damar Hamlin today of the Buffalo Bills, right? And we got some very encouraging news today. Damar Hamlin is awake. He has acknowledged, you know, his family, people in the room. The Buffalo Bills put out a statement today saying he made significant improvement overnight. He's neurologically intact. Doctors believe his lung capacity is getting better. Like, it feels like, and knock on wood and keep saying those prayers, that Damar Hamlin is on the road to recovery here. And let's hope that's still the case. But on the field Monday night, as Emily writes here, A former Syracuse football athletic trainer performed life-saving CPR on Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin when he collapsed and went into cardiac arrest Monday during a game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Albert Breer, a senior NFL reporter for Sports Illustrated, reported Thursday that Denny Kellington's work was, quote, absolutely vital and, quote, a huge difference maker. Kellington, part of a team of several medical professionals that worked to restore Hamlin's heartbeat using CPR and an AED on the field at Paycor Stadium before he was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. He worked, Kellington did, at Syracuse as the head football trainer, from 2005 to 2017. Amazing, the Syracuse connections that are out there in the world. And to know that, like, he was one of the first people out there. He helped revive Damar. I mean, just incredible to hear that. So hopefully we'll hear in the coming days from Denny. You know, the Bills are just getting back to business. They practiced today, and, you know, everybody's kind of wondering what they're going to do about that Bengals game. You got games coming up this weekend, right? That's not an easy thing to take a step forward on the field from something like that, but incredible to hear of a Syracuse connection in that case. Well done. Job well done, Denny Kellington. I didn't know Denny. I didn't speak with him when he was here at Syracuse. Probably interacted with him one way or the other, but so I don't know Denny, but shout out to him. Amazing job. And those medical professionals that jumped on that, and as it would appear, as it, knock on wood, just saved his life in that case. You know, frankly, there was probably no better place for him to be in the world, almost in the world, to be in that situation with all the medical professionals and the procedures that they have in place, and great people like Denny Kellington that knew exactly what to do in that moment when a lot of people were frazzled and panicked and didn't know what to do in that situation. Okay, on to Syracuse football. Just some final thoughts on the season. You know, they finished 7-6. They went to a bowl game. There was a lot of things that I think you have to check off as a step forward, as a positive. You go from a 1-win season 2 years ago to a 5-win season to a 7-win season. It's technically improvement. We weren't talking about a bowl game at this time last year. The coaching changes that happened after the end of the regular season, which I think they absorbed about as well as you could be, right? You just elevate Jason back to the offensive coordinator. Rocky Long comes in as the defensive coordinator. Nick Monroe, you know, kind of held down the fort temporarily. The transfer portal's been interesting. How about Jahad Carter this week? Ends up at Ohio State. So that stinks in a way, because Syracuse, I think your coaching staff gets punished in a way. Think about what you're tasked already with doing. If you're a Syracuse football coach, you're kind of mining the diamonds in the rough. You're trying to find the 3- and 4-star guys that can elevate and rise. You're not getting a bevy of 5-star players. You're already searching for people that have a lot of upside. They come to Syracuse, they show that, and then they go in the transfer portal, which I'm not opposed to, by the way, but that's got to suck if you're a Syracuse coach and you find these guys and they showcase themselves. And I'm all for people being at their best, but Deuce Chestnut looks like an NFL level talent, and he's like, I'm going to go somewhere else. Jahad Carter had an amazing season, a huge leap forward. He's like, I'm going to go somewhere else. Now, is he going to get on the field as much at Ohio State? Is Deuce Chestnut going to get on the field as much wherever he ends up? That's the question, right? It depends on – Syracuse goes the other way on this. Jaden Gold and a couple players they got from the portal, they're at high-level programs like Nebraska and Notre Dame, but they'll play here. So it's all a matter of contributing to something and not only showcasing your talents if you're on the level of where an NFL team could take a look at you and take you seriously, right? They'll find you. So I think that's what these guys get misconstrued a little bit. Now, if you want to go to an Ohio State and have a chance to win a national championship, hey, more power to you. But if this is just about playing time and exposure and the things that elite players think they're going to get, they're going to find you at Syracuse. Like, the NFL scouts will find you. That's not going to be an issue. If you want to play, Syracuse is a place where you'll have the chance to play, as opposed to maybe getting lost in the shuffle at Bama or Ohio State or TCU. Look at TCU and the rise they had, 200-1 odds to get to the national championship game before the season starts. And there they are, right? So all told, took a step forward, progress. I think there's a couple things, though, that they've really got to work on in the offseason. One is penalties. Syracuse was the most penalized team in college football this year. Do I really need to say how unacceptable that is? How appropriate was it that the final play of the Pinstripe Bowl was a penalty? Now, would Syracuse have driven up the field and scored a touchdown, got the 2-point conversion, tied the game at 28, given the time they had left, if they had the opportunity for one last possession there? Probably not, but Elijah Clark ensured that wouldn't happen by committing the penalty at the end of the game. So it was just so apropos. It was so just, you couldn't write the script any better. That what the theme was from Syracuse all year was penalties, and that's what sunk their battleship at the end of that game, right? You couldn't have written that script any better. The other thing they've got to work on, and they have the means to do it, is special teams. Now that they've got a full-time special teams coach in Bob Likashevsky, there was improvement there this year, but we started to see a slide. They brought in a punter from the transfer portal who, oh boy, his name is escaping me at the moment, but I was watching Monday Night Football, not this week, obviously, with the Bills and Bengals, but last week. Or was it Thursday night? I think it was Thursday Night Football. And the punter for the Tennessee Titans is a part of a punting family. There's like 5 or 6 between the NFL and college, and he's related to the player that Syracuse just brought in. So I think that's something they've got to ensure. They've obviously got to replace Andre Schmidt, who's one of the all-time great kickers in Syracuse history. He's going to be in NFL camp in the summer. You got to continue to look at the portal. The portal's not done. The second round of the portal is coming up soon here. Recruiting is not done. Syracuse lost Lenora Sellers. That was a huge blow. And look, frankly, I don't want to begrudge a kid for the decision that he made. He wanted to stay home. But look, South Carolina, there was something just, I want to say this in a diplomatic way, but there was something just that didn't smell right about that. Here you have this all-state player who's putting up huge numbers, recruited early by Jason Beck, when Beck was at Virginia, as a matter of fact. Sellers gets hurt in his junior year. Beck stays with him, sticks with him. Syracuse sticks with him, committed. You're our guy all the way, right? South Carolina essentially gets shamed into recruiting Lenora Sellers because they weren't on Sellers until like a month ago, right? Shane Beamer down there at South Carolina basically heard it from the fans, and they jump in and they go hard. And they went hard to get Sellers basically out of pride to say another notch in the belt. We kept the kid home right now. Maybe that's what Sellers wanted to do all along. And South Carolina wasn't there until the end. Again, it's his decision. And I'm not trying to doubt what an 18-year-old kid wants to do. I mean, come on, think about what, where our minds were senior year in high school and going to college and, life ahead of you and trying to make those decisions. So I'm trying to be respectful of that. But man, again, it's what we talked about with developing these players, and then they go in the portal. Here, Syracuse was in early, stuck with him, committed to him. I think he'd have a chance to compete, maybe not next year, but the year after that. And then right at the last minute, he goes somewhere where, look, if I could bet on this somewhere, I would bet on Lenora Sellers being in the transfer portal sometime in the next 2 years. He's not going to play at South Carolina. He would play here. So that's unfortunate. The quarterback room is actually pretty stacked, right? You got Garrett Schrader coming back. You've got Carlos Del Rio Wilson, who's ready to compete. Remember, Justin Lamson got hurt last year, played great in the spring game, looked like he was, at the very least, just going to compete in that room. Got hurt, missed the season. He's back, right? LaQuint Allen's got to step in for Sean Tucker. I love what I saw from LaQuint in the bowl game and down the stretch. I think Syracuse is in good hands there, but you got to develop some depth at that position. You got to find another receiver or two in the portal. We heard this week Caleb Okechukwu's coming back. Marlo Wax is coming back. You never know these days if guys are coming back, going to go to the portal, going to try their hand at the NFL, whatever the case may be. 2 anchors back there. Obviously, the secondary has to be fixed, and we mentioned the transfers that they brought in and a couple that we didn't at this point. So there's a lot there, and the benefit of a bowl game was not only the reward for a season and all that comes with just, saving face by going to a bowl game, 15 extra practices that you got before spring ball, right? What will be an interesting storyline here is that, and I asked John Wildhack about this directly on a chat right here on syracuse.com, which I'm sure a lot of you watched on, I was at December 4th, I believe it was. If not, it's here on the Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube channel. You can go back and watch the tape, if you will, of John and I speaking. And I asked him directly about a contract extension for Dino Babers and where his mind was there. Dino's contract, according to people that have seen it or know, because they don't make contracts public at Syracuse, expires 2024. Can you have a coach go forward here that doesn't have a contract extension? Whether you believe he deserves the contract extension or not, that's a whole different topic for a different day. It's tough to recruit. It's tough to stabilize. It's tough to convince people you're the guy if your own school hasn't given you a contract extension, right? 2 winning seasons in 7 years. Does that warrant a contract extension? 2 bowl games in 7 years. All the numbers, the records, he still has a losing record as a head coach. It's going to be an interesting thing to see if Syracuse makes that commitment and what kind of commitment they do. Now, what Wildhack said when I asked him about it was if this program keeps improving, he'll keep coaching here. So technically improvement, right, is 8 wins next year. If you want to go semantics on me, I mean, you can spin it all you want. Frankly, Wildhack is very good at, saying things in a way that he doesn't want to give you details, but he'll kind of give you his opinion on it. You keep improving, you'll keep coaching here. So I guess we have to define exactly what improvement is, because one thing Wildhack will say in these conversations is, I'm not going to put a number on it. So can you still improve, let's say next year, and win the same amount of games? Let's say they win 7 games next year. At least there's some consistency there, right? So that's going to be an interesting thing to follow. And football kind of fades out. Basketball takes full focus here. Lacrosse is going to be starting soon. I know we got some peeps out there that love the lacrosse. Yours truly included. Played the sport, loved the sport, love covering the sport. So that's going to get ramped up soon. And here we go. But to circle back to what we started the show with and we'll end the show with, while highlighting a couple of your comments here to close out. Good to see Robbie in here as always. The schedule gets real now for Syracuse basketball, right? Didn't talk Syracuse women's hoops today, but they had a couple of, close games. Louisville first, who's been a really good women's basketball program in the ACC. NC State top 6 team, Felicia Leggett-Jack's team, who play Pittsburgh. Today's Thursday as we speak. If you're watching this later on, you may know the result of this game already. But as we speak here at noon 50, if you will, 12:50 Thursday afternoon. Thursday, 6 o'clock tip, Syracuse and Pittsburgh at the JMA Wireless Dome. So we'll see if Felicia Leggett-Jack and company can get an ACC win here against Pittsburgh. But they played tooth and nail, down to the wire games against Louisville and NC State. So you've already seen the improvement there. They've won 10 games this season. They're fun to watch. They play their butts off. And you got Tisha Hyman, Daisha Fair, a couple of really good players. Georgia Woolley the other night with 23 points. So we'll certainly put more of a spotlight on women's basketball too, as we start to see them get in the throes of ACC play as well. But certainly worth your time and worth watching and keeping an eye on there as well. Let's end Orange Weekly for this week on that note, friends. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Tell your friends. We're here Thursdays, 12 o'clock Eastern time-ish, as I like to say. Had a couple of technical gremlins today that we had to work out before we got on the air, but we made it work, right? Thursdays, noonish, but if you missed the show, archives on all these channels you're watching now, the Facebook channels, YouTube, we put it out on social media. There'll be a post on syracuse.com. So always easy to circle back and watch the show on replay if you can't check it live. But, if you're here live, you can get your comments highlighted, like our friend Mike from El Paso. There it is. It's not a show until I get the Mike from El Paso. There's our guy. Shout out to Mike. Wherever you are watching today, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back Saturday after Syracuse and Virginia. That's a 5 o'clock tip. So 7 o'clock or so, as soon as the game's over, get right back here on the Syracuse Orange Basketball Facebook page on YouTube, and we will recap and highlight Syracuse and Virginia as the schedule ramps up for the Orange following what's been, a stretch where they've won 7 of 8 games. But now it gets real. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for watching today, friends. Enjoy the rest of your week. This has been Orange Weekly, presented by Crouse Health.